Hi everyone, welcome to the second installment in our series, Decision Determines Destiny. Let me start by quoting a few verses from Proverbs chapter 1, and as I do so, please pay attention to the highlighted words on your screen. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right, just, and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. I jump to verse 31. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. In the first 4 verses, we see the characteristics or attributes of wisdom. The first one is insight. Insight is the ability to see subtle differences or distinctions that others don't always see. The second is prudence. It is being practical or strategic. It is that ability to see the implications and consequences of a decision beyond the immediate situation. Proverbs classifies unwise into 2 broad categories. The simple. The simple is someone who is naive, unformed emotionally, or unrooted spiritually, such that their decision is a reflection of the decisions of those around them. They make their decisions based on the cultural momentum around that particular issue. Therefore, their decisions are always shifting. The second is a fool. A fool is someone who is wise, but only in their own eyes. Both the simple and the fool are out of touch with reality in very different ways with respect to decision making. The simple is mostly that young, inexperienced person that's easily swayed by peer pressure and carried by cultural momentum. While the simple may be more open to receiving godly counsel, the fool is less likely because of his prideful view. Both of them, though, need a good dose of the fear of the Lord, which Proverbs tells us is the beginning of wisdom. What that means is letting God, not pride or culture, determine what reality is for you. Today we're considering godly counsel. I know I have touched on it a few times over the last few weeks, but today we'll dig in a bit more. I want to share a story from the Bible with you. The story is found in 1 Kings chapter 12, and it helps to illustrate the core principle of today's teaching. Now, just to give you a little bit of background before we jump into the text, Solomon, the son of David, the author of Proverbs, became the 3rd king of Israel. He started well at the beginning of his reign, but towards the end his heart was turned against God by his many foreign wives. And God was displeased with Solomon because he didn't obey and follow him wholeheartedly as his father David did. Consequently, God said to Solomon, I'm going to tear away the kingdom from you and your family. But in honor of your father David, to whom I made a promise, I will leave only a small fraction of it to his dynasty, because you have disobeyed me. But I will not do it during your reign. At the same time God was talking to Solomon, he sent a prophet to a man named Jeroboam and gave him the same prophecy, that God would tear a large portion of the kingdom away from the house of David and give it to him and his followers. Solomon found out about this prophecy and wasn't happy. So he decided to kill Jeroboam. Jeroboam became aware of the plot and fled to Egypt. When Solomon died, the whole nation came together to make his son Rehoboam king of Israel. But just before the coronation, they made one simple request. This is where we jump into the text, and I'll just be reading from 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 1. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. So everybody was going to make Rehoboam king in place of his father. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt. So they sent to Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. So Solomon was constantly constructing. He was building edifices, so the taxes were very high and people were burdened. And so they have come to ask Rehoboam to lighten the load and give them a little bit of respite. Rehoboam replied, "Go away for 3 days and then come back to me." So the people went away. This was one of the very smart things that Rehoboam first did at the first. He asked for more time, which is what we must always do when we are facing a very difficult or important decision. There's no need rushing any decision. So he asked for a 3 days period to consider their offer. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his time. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. This again was a smart move. He went to people who had served his father, who had been there, they had seen the mistakes of his father, they had seen the successes of his father, so they know exactly how to advise this young man. They replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servant." Verse 8, but Rehoboam rejected the advice the others gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What is your advice? How should I answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke that your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke, I'll make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam as the king had said, "Come back to me in 3 days." Verse 13, the king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given to him by the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy, I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of event was from the Lord, to fulfill the word the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite. This story illustrates two key principles. The first is that you should go to other people for wise counsel. The second is choose carefully who to listen to. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 14 says, "For the lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors." To Rehoboam's credit, he sought counsel from the elders, but whose advice did he take in the end? So the question for us is, where should we go to find counsel? We obviously can't find God's counsel everywhere. God has given us this counterintuitive community called the body of Christ. The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 how none of us is independent, just as our body parts are not independent of each other. One of the best gifts God has given us is the gift of His people. Find wise people within your small group, the church family, and the body of Christ at large who can offer you God's perspective on an issue or situation. In church, we have people who are gifted with discernment and prudence. Some have wisdom from experience, while others have incredible insights. And you can leverage any of this for your decision-making advantage. Who should you talk to when you are in need of counsel? I'll give you at least 4 points. The first is, don't seek counsel from those who will tell you what you want to hear. There must be people who do not have something to gain from the outcome of your decision. Number 2, it is better to seek counsel from people who know you well and who will be honest with you. This is because they know your personality and tendencies and how that might affect your decision-making process. Number 3, look for someone who has done what you are planning to do and succeeded at it. They probably will have a roadmap for going there. Number 4, seek wisdom from those with a track record of being wise, who are known for being prudent and discerning. And then prayerfully consider counsel that you have received and make your decision. Finally, I want to tell you, don't miss next week. we will look at the 6 steps to making good decisions. Hope you have a wonderful time tonight. God bless.